Oh hey, didn't see you there. My name's Allie. I love to bake, and for the longest time I've wanted to get better, so I am putting myself through pastry school. And by pastry school, I mean I bought the Cordon pastry textbook. It has over 100 recipes from entremets to cheesecake, both of which seemed very daunting, so I'm starting with biscuits and small cakes, which is something that I understand. My first assignment, coconut raspberry Financiers. Jumping right in, we are melting 140 grams of unsalted butter over the stove. This whole book, because it's a French text, is in grams, which prompted me to buy a food scale. I'm okay with it. Apparently it makes for more accurate baking anyway. And after you get your butter melted, I just let mine chill on the stove because we're going to be using it later. Into a mixing bowl goes 260 grams of icing sugar, 9 egg whites, or 270 grams. Now this textbook is very non-specific in terms of how long to beat things, so I kind of just eyeballed it until it was combined. I knew I didn't want to get those egg whites too whipped up before I added 60 grams of ground almonds. And then I was supposed to add desiccated coconut. I had no idea what desiccated coconut was, but apparently it's just finely ground and dried coconut. I ground mine down even further in my Vitamix, and it came out super fine, super awesome, so I measured 40 grams of that desiccated coconut into my bowl. I gave that all a thorough mix. Again, this book is very non-specific in terms of how combined your ingredients are supposed to be, so again, you just kind of have to eyeball it. Thank you, Le Cordon Bleu. After that was combined, I added 20 grams of honey, and then again, mix until I guess you feel it in your bones that it's done. And then we follow up with 1 teaspoon of baking powder and 100 grams of plain flour. I didn't sift this. I felt like I maybe should have, but I guess it was fine. Again, very non-specific textbook. The batter looked a little chunky yet funky at this point, but then we came in with that unsalted melted butter from before, and it turned into what looked more like a regular cake batter. We went in for more vague stirring time until it all looked incorporated, and then it was time for the fun part. We have to transfer this batter into a piping bag. I learned this trick where you drape the piping bag over a cup and it makes it much more mess-free. I was honestly shocked that this did not end up all over me, all over my counter, all over my cats, all over my fiance, all over my feet. And then it was time to pipe this into these fun pink silicone molds I got. I was feeling real smart about my piping bag hack until I realized that this batter was so thin that I could not cut the tip off of this without it pooling out the end, so don't watch me be really unsanitary. I'm gonna snip the part off that I had in my mouth. And now we are piping our batter into the molds. These should be about 3/4 of the way full. Now, this book called for silicone Financier molds that were 7.5 by 4 centimeters. Come to find out, those don't exist on Amazon, anywhere on the internet, so my molds were a little bit smaller than the ones in the book, and Mr. Le Cordon Bleu is just gonna have to deal with it. The recipe said this would yield 20 Financiers, and joke's on them because with my small molds I got 24. Next, we are poking 2 raspberries in each Financier. This was going to be a really rich batter with the icing sugar and the butter and the coconut, so I knew that these raspberries would balance everything out with their tartness. And then we sprinkled more desiccated coconut on top before transferring 2 baking sheets to go in the oven. These bake at 180 degrees Celsius, which is 356 degrees Fahrenheit. The recipe said it would take about 15 minutes. I kept these bad boys in there for at least 30 just because they were not browning as much as I wanted them to. And I don't know if it was my oven, if God was mad at me this day, if it was the way I filled the molds, but my financiers were not browning evenly, so I was a little bit concerned with the bake, but I was eager to pop them out of the molds and see what they looked like under the hood. They smelled great when they came out, very coconutty. Nobody told me that silicone baking mats stayed hot. They're not like aluminum foil, so I was pretty much singeing off my fingerprints mobster style, pulling these out of the molds. And my worst fear came true. They were a little bit pale on the top and a little bit too brown on the bottom. You can see there's that crazy contrast. They had the craziest texture on the sides. I don't know if that was due to the silicone or the batter with the icing sugar, but it looked like you could drip water down the sides and it would just run off. Very pretty, but a very, very tight bake, if that makes sense. I think it was kind of a draw with the bake on these because even though the bottom was dark, it wasn't burnt, it was still very soft, and the insides were cooked all the way through, and I did achieve the golden brown color on top that was requested. They smelled like coconut. They taste like a pretty generic white cake. My fiance said that he could really taste the butter. I was mostly just hunting for raspberries to cut that sweetness while I was munching on these. As far as desserts go, Financiers, I give them a 6 out of 10, but I'm looking forward to the next bake.